I'm John, and I'm one of the owners of the gallery, and I'm very excited to introduce Sarah Knock tonight for her artist talk for her 11th solo show with Greenhut. Just a little bit about Sarah's background. She has a BFA from Boston University. Her work's been exhibited at Colby College Museum of Art, Portland Museum of Art, Farnsworth Museum, Penobscot Marine Museum, and the CMCA. She has received a fellowship from the Maine Arts Commission and a Karina House residency on Monhegan Island. Her works in numerous private and public collections, and her paintings have been featured in Paintings of Maine, The Art of Monhegan Island, and The Art of Maine in Winter. Particularly excited for Sarah to talk tonight on her show, Reflections on Water. I really like the title because most of the paintings are literally reflections on the water, but it also represents Sarah's travels and her sort of reflections on the differences in the water in different locations of the world. But I'm most excited tonight to hear about Sarah's process and alchemy in turning flat paint and abstract forms into liquid. With that, we're also going to have a very exciting multimedia presentation. But with that, I'll turn it over to Sarah.
Thank you, John. Thank you. So nice to see so many people here tonight. It's a beautiful time to come inside, but I appreciate you all coming. So you can probably see by looking around that I have a fascination with reflections. But what you probably don't know, or many of you don't know, is that I also have a passion for kayaking. And what I feel blessed about is that I can combine these two passions in the pursuit of paintings. So I feel very, very lucky. But this wasn't always the case in terms of the kayaking. When I first got interested in painting the water, I would stand at the shore and I would look out at this deep into space with a big, long distance between me and maybe an island, and it would be looking out on a horizontal plane. But when I got a kayak about 20 years ago, that all changed. And my perspective was very different because I was just a few inches from the water. When I was painting from the shore, like I was describing a minute ago, I really felt like an observer. And when I got into kayaking, I felt like I was participating and I was experiencing nature more directly. When I get in my boat, I can feel the water beneath me, I can feel the waves and the current, and it's just an incredible feeling. I'm just curious, how many people here have kayaked or? Oh, wow. So you know what I'm talking about. That's awesome. That's really awesome. So let's see. What was I going to say? The other thing that kayaking does is it gives me access to the water and to the islands and little coves, shallow coves, and areas that larger boats can't maneuver in. So it's just amazing. I can paddle up to an island, I can get close to the island, or I can back up and look at the island from a little shorter distance away. And there's just so much maneuverability. The only challenge is the wind and the currents and all those things, but it's a wonderful thing to do. So I'd like to just sort of address a question people have asked me about in the past is, why do I do reflections? What do I like about reflections? And I really love to observe moving patterns in color on the water and the shape of water. And what I mean by that is sometimes the reflections, the pieces of reflections go up and over a wave, not a huge wave, but a small wave, and that really defines the form of the water, the structure of it. It's not always just flat. I don't usually paint flat water. The other challenge about reflections that I enjoy is that I have to react very quickly. And I came from a background in black and white photography where I learned to do that. I enjoyed street photography, and I also learned that I had to look through a viewfinder and quite quickly sum up all the parts, the lights and the darks and the pattern and the gesture and the movement, the composition, and look and try to get that very quickly before everything moved. In the case of street photography, people moving around. It wasn't just a still life or something like that that wasn't moving. So I had kind of already gotten that kind of a skill with photography. I was really interested in the idea of the decisive moment, which Henri Cartier-Bresson made well known, which is all about what I just spoke of, is finding just the right moment to click that shutter. I don't use a motor drive or a burst or whatever they're called now that takes multiple exposures really fast. I don't use those, so I do try to hone in on what I hope will be a good idea for a painting first time through. The other thing I like about doing reflections is that, oddly, what I like about it is the odds are very low that I'll come up with a painting idea when I go out. And I say that because if it were easy, I'd be bored and I just wouldn't be doing it. And then the other thing I like about reflections that I'll share is the challenge of trying to interpret them back in the studio. And usually they're pretty complex as you look around. So they're very challenging, but who doesn't enjoy a challenge, right? The current show, I can say a little bit about. When I am on my kayak and I look straight down, the water is actually dark green. I guess it's because of all the plankton, thank you, the plankton in the water. And it's semi-transparent. You can see down a ways and you can see seaweed and maybe a foot down or so, but unless there's a sandy bottom, you really can't see that much. So what I wanted to do, and I love the Maine coast above everywhere I've been, but what I wanted to do for this show was take that as kind of the middle of a spectrum, the Maine water, which is semi-transparent, and go over here with try to find opaque water, and over on this side of the spectrum, try to find really transparent water. So I had been to Venice, so I knew I wanted to go back there for this show and really look at the canal reflections, which are just so gorgeous. How many of you have been to Venice? So I just don't even need to talk. You know exactly what I mean. Those colors, they're very different from Maine, and the water is opaque. There's not much reflecting through that water. But the colors are beautiful. The rusts and the ochres and the muted purples and yellows. And it reminds me of an undulating oriental carpet. So I loved going there. That was wonderful. And then on the other side of that opaque kind of water was the water of Croatia, which was fabulous. It was crystal clear. I could see all the way to the bottom. Where'd it go? Oops, can you put it back to the first one? The first one? Thank you.
Back to the first one?
Yeah.
Okay.
No, the Dubrovnik one.
Oh,
That one, thank you. Okay, so anyway, that's Croatia. And let's see, where was I? And I also had been to Scotland, and I had an idea for Scotland, which wasn't, the water was kind of opaque, semi-transparent as it is in Maine, but the mood was really different. It was moody, misty, mysterious kind of light and water. So I wanted to include that in my spectrum. The challenge was to explore a variety of color palettes and water transparencies and then try to relate them for the show. So that was my challenge. So I would like to show you a video of what it's like to go out in a kayak and explore a little area and kind of show you what the challenges are and what works and what doesn't work. So we'll start with that, okay? It's a gorgeous morning. I'm approaching Sow and Pig Islands, two of my favorite little islands in the bay. And the conditions are just right. The tide is high, so I'm not going to get stuck at low tide. I'm trying to get back. There's barely any breeze, so there should be some nice reflections, but not too mirror-like, hopefully. Buskin's Island is in the background. I'm going to approach the islands and see what I can find. You hear okay, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Here's the little passageway between Sow and Pig Islands. I don't see any reflections that interest me at this point, so they're a little too mirror-like, and there's not a whole lot of color contrast going on. But I'm going to go a little further in and see what is near the end of the islands. I just want to show you how quickly the current is moving my boat. It makes it really difficult to try to sketch anything. Within just a few seconds, I've moved quite a ways. My perspective is totally gone, totally changed. It's pretty interesting. It's a little gut going through this several islands, so the current is moving quite quickly. This is a beautiful little ledge out by Sound Pig Islands. I painted it several times. I'm moving very quickly with the current, so I don't have much opportunity to grab a drawing or some photos even when the water's like this. Beautiful colors today with this light. This is an example of a really quick sketch that I might be able to do for my kayak if I can hold the boat still enough for long enough. They're very fast. I usually do them without really looking at the paper. But they kind of give me a feeling for what I'm looking at. This is an example of the same area, but it's a finished painting that I did maybe a year or two ago, and I wanted you to see that I'm really interested in pushing color to a more intense version than what you might see in a photograph. And in this case, I was really interested in being able to see some seaweed under the water. I was doing a lot of paintings like that at one point. This is another version of that same ledge from a little bit of a different perspective with a little bit more water motion and some seaweed on the bottom right. Excuse me, this is a different day. I wanted to show
I'm out of Sound Pig Island, and this is a ledge that I love to paint in various conditions. Right now, it's a very low tide, so the seaweed is unveiling all of the ledge. The nice thing about a low tide is that when there's a lot of seaweed is that I can anchor myself in the seaweed and not move around very much in my kayak. I usually do just really quick drawings where I don't even look at the paper and sketch more like a blind drawing sketching method. It's kind of a cloudy day, but really beautiful, all the same. I want to back up a little bit so you could see exactly how much seaweed there is. I actually got stuck in the seaweed. I'd been there too long. The tide receded, and I was pretty stuck in those rocks. But I got out. So that's the ledge at low tide. It goes on quite a ways. And this way, over to Buston's Island, some Pig Islands. It's really quiet. My husband Glenn's with me, which is always a pleasure. Nice quiet morning.
This next one's a little noisy because of the wind, but it's short, so you're just going through the passage now. The breeze came up quickly, and all the reflections got
disturbed. I'll go between the islands and see if there's anything to salvage.
I hope you got that. It's just talking about how the winds came up and all the reflections are all disturbed.
No good reflections at this point, but I did want to take a quick shot of a section of Sound Pig Islands that's in the show.
Where is that? Oh, it's right here. Yeah, this is obviously a cloudier day than this, but same place.
This is another little island area on Sound Pig Islands that I painted several times. But as you can see, the reflections are all disturbed. It's way too complicated and detailed right now for me. And I'll show you one more if I can get around the end of the island.
Before I take you around the end of the island, I'll show you a painting from a different time where things were lining up for me. I really like the movement of the water in the foreground in this one. And again, I intensified the color. But that's such a pretty little spot. Love it there.
Here's the ledge at Sound Pig Island. This is the side that's closest to Buston's Island, which was the furthest island away when I started this little series of videos. This is also an angle that I used for another painting in the show. I can show you. We just came through that little passageway, and here's the other island, Sound Pig Island. I'm not sure which is which.
Where is that? Okay, that's that one.
So I'm heading back. It seemed like a perfect opportunity with all the conditions right for maybe finding some ideas to paint. And it was a lovely time to just paddle and enjoy it, but no ideas for paintings today. Often the case. The breeze is pushing my kayak along. I'm getting a free ride, and it's really beautiful to see the rockweed submerged under the water. It's pretty shallow here. Let's see what's on the other side.
So that was what happens out there. Not always good luck for paintings, but it helps to go out early if the tide's right, like before the wind picks up, which it usually does sometime during the morning. But the tide isn't always there at the right time. The conditions aren't always perfect. It's just there's a lot of things that have to line up for it to work out. I'd like to take you inside my studio now. My studio is never this neat, but I had just delivered all the paintings to Greenhut, so it was pretty picked up. And this is one of the islands, sister island, that I paint a lot, that I can see from my window, which is incredible. I'd like to show you how I prepare for a show. I get all my ideas spread out all around me, my drawings, my photos from the previous two years or so as a general approximate time. And then I start sketching them and trying to find out what sizes I will make them and have a good variety of verticals and horizontals and small ones and larger ones. And then I order stretchers and I put them all together with my husband, who's a huge help. And so that's how it starts. I'd like to just continue by showing you the stages that I go through to complete a painting. So what I'm going to do with these shots, I'd like you to try something. If you, I'm going to show you the painting finished, then some steps, and then the finished paintings again. So if you can try to remember what it looks like as we go through it, you'll get more out of understanding the stages. So this is the initial, one of the initial stages. There's just a lot of dark washes of color. By washes, I mean turpentine and oil mixed together in a thin layer. You can see some drawing. I really want to, right off the bat, I want to be sure the water makes sense from side to side and top to bottom. By that I mean it's got to work, it's got to connect correctly, or it won't feel like water. And my goal is for my paintings to feel like water. Oops. Oh. This is just a detail. You can probably figure this out for yourself, but I'll just offer a few things. I wanted to get the color and value of this lower corner nailed because I thought it was going to be quite a challenge. And some drawing, some more drawing. You'll see the drawing, I keep continuing the drawing process. It has to dry for a week. I put some more tones down. It has to dry for a week. Then more drawing, back and forth, back and forth.
That's our dog.
Yeah, sorry. Gus walked into it. I was really interested in trying to get this little bit of seaweed established in this painting. Spent quite a bit of time on that and then kept trying to move around the painting at the same time. Okay, and then the final painting. So I have a few more of these I'd like to share with you. Oops. What I missed. I don't know if you saw that. That was pretty fast. It's the Stonington house. Okay.
It's right there.
This is the first stage. I don't know how to go backwards with this. And here's a little one. So I start out with usually with a burnt sienna wash and a very simple drawing. They look pretty dismal, I think, at this point, but they make sense to me with some greens and some blues and some purples. The purples usually are going to end up being some sort of neutrals or lights or whites, but they go down as purple. The greens are obviously trees, the blues are skies and other things. I wanted to experiment with what that color was going to be so I could relate it to everything else in the painting because that was the most interesting color for me. I still don't know how I'm going to finish this. I've got all this to figure out, a lot of stuff to figure out. But one thing at a time. This was a complicated little area. But, and then this is the final painting. This is this one again. So if you can try to remember it, you'll see what happens. The drawing, the tones, more tones, more drawing. And here I start putting in just dots of color, little bits of color every which way so I can kind of hold it in my head to see where I'm headed.
What are you drawing with?
What I draw with, a brush and ultramarine paint, usually. This is that painting. It started out like this. More drawing. I wanted to get some whites and the most intense color in the painting noted so that everything else could relate to those. Nothing else would be any whiter than that boat, these whites, and nothing else would be more intense than that yellow-green. And that's the final painting. This is Venice, a close-up of Venice, which is more abstract than some of the other paintings. And it started out like this. These were very different colors for me. I wanted to develop some darks, but I didn't want them to get opaque. And sometimes browns do that. They get very dark and opaque. So that was a little challenging. Some close-ups of some of this. And the reds. One thing to note is I work in little sections like that so I can try to get this reflection to feel like it's part of the water, the blue part without the reflection. And that can take a while. This is Oban, Scotland. Very different color palette for me, a lot of blues and greens, very deep, dark, greenish greens, and blue greens to compare. So when I'm not used to certain colors, or I don't know how I want to set up a painting, what colors I want to use, I often mix colors for hours, and I make notes and I save these things, and they tell me what colors I've used and what the mixtures are. Kind of like doing a little research. And you'll see the same process with washes of color, some drawing, a bit more. A bit more. This is the palette that I used for this painting. I couldn't wait to get to this yellow stripe. It's not there yet. I mean orange. Finally. Okay, this is Venice, obviously. This was really complicated to draw. I ended up drawing a grid on top of this so that I could make sense of it. And then I take the grid off with charcoal grid. And I take it off and I paint some more, and then I'd have to reestablish it. It was so confusing. But it was really fun to work on. I love the colors from the scene. It took me a long time. I try to establish a few spots in the painting so that I know where I'm headed, like crumbs and Hansel and Gretel. Like, where am I following? What am I doing here? Where am I? It's kind of confusing. Details. I finally got some of this in, this blue and other colors, and I'm starting to move around and enjoy the colors after a lot of drawing. Still not done, but almost. Okay. Again, these were different colors for me. I decided to do the top of the painting first, the wall reflection, and then tackle the bottom with blue-green washes. At this point, I put a grid across here to try to figure out how to make sense of the shapes here, and I drew it in white. I don't know if you can see, because these are light. These are where the drawings were, those light marks. There's the painting. There's the palette. I think I just have one more here. This is this painting. The challenge for me in this painting was down in here, trying to get warm colors that were not opaque, that felt like they were on the surface and moving. That's the detail. I still have to figure this out at this point, and this. And that's that. That's the last one for the stages. Then the last thing I'd like to show you is just a variety of paintings from the past. They're about, I don't know, not too many of them. You doing okay?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So the first three are paintings of wharfs, different wharfs, which I still enjoy doing wharfs because of the architecture and the patterns. So this was an older one of Custom Wharf. Custom Wharf is really hard to paint right now because there's so much stuff in the water that there wasn't before. They've added docks and ramps and I don't know. Can't go there anymore. This is same place as that painting up there. This was a dock on Swan's Island that was being constructed. I love doing winter when the ice is a certain way, and it was just beautiful that particular winter. This next one is the same, exact same place, only in the summer. That's one of the islands near my house. This is just a cloud reflection, and I really enjoy flipping this horizontal space. I started out talking about vertical. I don't know if that makes sense. It's really hard to put that in words. But I like to just close in, not have a deep space, but have a shallow space and flip it up. It just feels much more abstract and interesting for me to work that way. This is down East Maine, Pennamaquan River. It's a tidal river, and I was interested in the time looking through the water to see the rocks. Same place, same idea, different time. It's a pretty river. This is part of a diptych, actually a triptych. This is called Pole Reflection, and this is Swimming Dog. Sometimes I do sunrises or sunsets. Not very often. I'm afraid of doing them because they can get kind of sweet. But sometimes they're irresistible. This was a winter sunrise. This one and the next one are from Amalfi, and again, the plane is flipping up. It's vertical, it's abstract, and I really enjoyed that about it. The same thing with this one. This is another river, looking underwater at the rocks. This is the ocean, I think up by Stonington. This is Sow and Pig again, but with the tide partway between high tide and low tide. Very complicated situation. I spent so long on this painting, I thought it would have been a lot easier if I just waited for high tide and covered it all. It would have been covered up and a lot easier. And the last one is another beautiful little spot, a little bit further out for me, but it's near Whaleboat Island. Which is Whaleboat Island. It's called Little Whaleboat Island, and it's really hard to access in anything but a kayak or something with no draft underneath it. And I just had to wait for some water motion for that one. So that's it for the slides. And I'm not sure if we have time for questions. We do? We have time for questions, I guess.
You ever create your own water motion?
I used to. Yeah. My husband Glenn used to come with me kayaking and created the water motion.
Over there, over there.
Yeah, we haven't done that in a while. Yeah. Yeah.
Your iterative process is really interesting. Have you discovered a point where you're working on a painting and you reach a point where you realize it's not going to go forward and maybe it's not a common point
Right.
in other endeavors, but can you describe that?
You mean if something's not going to
You
work?
realize there's a point where you discover
Yeah.
it's not going to go to completion.
Yes, yes. I try to push through that whenever possible, but there have been some that should have been in the bonfire. Yeah.
But what is that? I mean, is it just
What-
something that's very subjective and you can't really articulate?
You know what? It usually is it's usually a problem with composition. If the composition is good, I feel, this is just my belief, that you can almost make anything, do almost anything with a painting. That's not totally true. It's kind of a hyperbole, but if the composition isn't good, and I can remember a painting like that, and I just couldn't make it work. But usually I try to work through those.
To be true to the subject, you realize it's just not something you can manipulate.
Exactly. Yeah. Looking back at older work, I think that one I should have, yeah, not completed. But it's good to try to push. I feel for me, it's good to push through that. But yeah.
Do you rely on photographs to help you capture the reflection?
Oh, definitely. Yes. Yes.
What role does with the sketches have?
The sketches.
If you're bringing back photographs, what role do the sketches on the site have?
They just remind me of what was most important. If you only have a minute to do a sketch, then you usually, unless you get too noodly about it, you put down what's important first. So that would be the purpose of it. I miss drawing because I really like drawing and I just can't really do that much from my boat. Just too many problems. So I do use photographs, yes. And I actually prefer to use a monitor than a photograph. Yeah.
Can you tell us about your palette?
Yeah. And can you tell me what you mean by that?
The colors you use.
The colors I use.
I mean, do you use a limited palette?
Oh, I see.
Are you someone who uses just tons of different colors? Maybe you've got 20 on your palette.
I have a lot of paint. My artist friends and I see two of them are my good artist friends. We always like to go to the art store and get a new tube of paint because then it's really fun to mix that new tube of paint with other existing paint. I end up using the same, more or less, maybe a quarter of the paints that I have. I might every once in a while use some of the paints. I know for Venice I thought, oh, I don't have any of these colors. I've got to go buy some new paint. But I ended up finding that most of that could have been painted with a pretty limited palette. So I'm not sure if that...
Well, I was just wondering what colors you use. Like, do you go in for 3 or 4 blues, the cadmium, the ultramarine, cobalt, or do you like to use more exotic colors?
I have, the paintings from Dubrovnik are very different blues than I'm used to. So I might have gotten some new blues for that, some Caribbean blue and some dark ceruleum and some other things that I hadn't used before. But I don't have a limited palette, but I have favorite colors that I'm used to. Yeah, I think I know what you mean, because when I first started painting, I started to have a very limited palette, and it was good. But it's so tempting to get new colors. Yeah. Yeah.
Do you always put a wash on your paintings first? And
Yes.
what does that do for you?
I can't paint on a white canvas. I don't know. It's just, I like something dark, because then if I put something even slightly light on it, it already looks light because of the comparison. Yeah.
I heard you say that you use photographs and you prefer to reference looking at them on your monitor. is that correct?
Mhm.
Do you ever zoom in for a closer understanding of the details?
Sometimes, yeah.
And do you ever change the intensity, be it the contrast or the color? Because you can do that once you have a digital image, you can manipulate it, or are you
Yeah.
just using your raw photograph?
I don't change them much at all, if at all, no.
Because sometimes that can give you a
It
little bit
can.
more information.
Right.
Especially with water.
Right, and the temptation is there. Sometimes I do it because I just can't see something, or I want to see a detail like you were saying, but then the danger for me would be seeing too much, and then
Having to edit it.
trying to simplify it back from too much to make it simpler again. So maybe just to understand, but not to paint all that detail. That's what I would be thinking. Yeah. Mhm.
Your paintings are phenomenal. They're so much better than the pictures. It's just
Oh,
amazing.
thank you. Thank you. It's really hard to get photos of paintings.
Yeah.
It's really hard.
Beautiful.
Yes.
How do you decide your horizon lines? They're different on night paintings. The horizon higher or lower?
How do I decide? I really like a high horizon line or no horizon line at this point, because I'm more interested in the water than I would be the sky. I really don't like painting clouds. But this one's kind of in the middle.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah. Yeah, there are a lot of time, I guess they're going higher and higher for me.
How many do you have typically work on at a time?
Great question. When I started the show, I'd like to order almost all the stretchers and get them all stretched at once. And because they take a week to dry between stages, I like to have more than one painting going at once. Typically, maybe 3, 4 sometimes at once, and then I just abandon 3 of them and finish 1 at a certain point. But they kind of talk to each other, and when I can learn something from one to apply to another one, so I like that process.
So going along with that, how do you manage your palette going from one to the other and one to the other? Do you scrape and
I don't
change
usually
and-
do 2 in a day. I do maybe one day and then one the next. Yeah, that's the problem. My other problem with that is I don't have that. I have so many brushes and they're never right, and so I end up using just a few brushes and having to keep cleaning them. And
Okay, 2 questions, 2 different subjects.
Oh.
How many hours a day do you paint,
uh,
on average?
yeah, well, for this show I was painting a lot of long hours, maybe 8, 6. That for me that's long because I stand the whole time.
But do you have, like, I go in the studio at 9 o'clock and I finish at 6 o'clock, or the deadline for the show dictates how many hours?
As the show gets closer and
Yeah.
closer. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
The other question I had is, say you have 3 or 4 paintings going and water is your focus. Do you ever jump on land just to clear your mind, or any, do you know what I mean? If you kind of go over here, it's not something for the show, it's nothing, but you just need to kind of
No,
give your eye a rest to get away from the water for a half hour and then kind of.
no. I would do other things. I do dance classes,
Oh.
or I garden, or I go for a walk or something, but I don't do what you're saying. I don't really have time to start any other kind of paintings if I'm getting
Well,
ready
this
for a
wouldn't be
show.
for sale or for anything, but
Yeah.
just kind of giving your eye and your hand.
Yeah, it seems like a great idea, but I just takes so much focus, I guess, and it might be a good relief, but no, I haven't
I
done
like
that.
the dance, actually.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, sure.
Sarah, do you ever, do, the same scene, not only in oil, but say maybe watercolor, or?
Not normally, no. Again, I love these ideas. Maybe I'll have time for some of them. Yeah,
By doing a different medium.
it's true, yeah. We used to talk about that when I was teaching, how one medium can inform another medium, and it's very true, yeah. And I have that idea, and then I just don't do it. I don't get to it for some reason. Yeah, but I think it's a good idea. I really do. Yeah.
I've never heard of an artist preparing for a show, a long time ago, I used to work for a museum, and I was always a curator that sort of shows where the different photographs or the different paintings or artwork went. And just from what you said, it seemed like you sort of studied the space and you knew where your paintings, how you wanted them to position. Is that true?
You mean the way I set the show up with the grid
You know,
and?
when you come in and you're the one that's dictating this painting's to go here and this
Oh,
one's
here in the gallery.
Yeah, I mean.
I don't have any say. I mean,
That's what I thought, but then you
I mean,
said
I'm sure they
something
would.
got me confused.
Oh, I see. Oh,
When you said you started preparing for the show, it was
I
what
see.
paintings you wanted to put in.
I see what you mean.
How you worked
yeah.
for that.
Preparing for paintings for the show is what I
Yeah.
should have said, yeah.
Okay.
When I bring the paintings here, I let the experts
Yeah,
hang it.
right.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
You know when you're done, do you have an infinite feeling for, I gotta adjust it, or is there a point where you just say no more?
That is such a hard question. Oh, how many painters are here tonight? Yeah, so how do you know when a painting's done?
It tells you.
Hmm?
It really does tell you. You
It
get to
tells-
a point where if you cross the line, you're gonna kill it, so.
You're gonna kill it if you go too
The
far.
deadline arrived.
Out of time. Yeah, yeah. Oh, my husband was always saying, why don't you just stop now? So I guess everybody would stop at a different time. What he's referring to, the painting might have be more like one of the stages that you saw, but I always feel like there's something else that I haven't figured out so yeah, it's a great question, and I wish I knew exactly how to answer that.
You don't touch it after you sign it. You don't have to answer that.
Okay. Tempting, yeah. I had an experience on Monhegan Island once. I met this artist. He wanted to buy my painting, but what he wanted to do was buy it so he could paint on top of it. Make the changes that he thought should be made to the painting. I thought that was pretty interesting.
So what happened?
I didn't want him to get the painting. I mean, I don't know. Just seems strange.
I wasn't sure I was going to ask this question, but I don't know the way to ask it. I've been staring at this painting, and you talk about horizons, and you also talk about being very close to the water. Now, I noticed that the horizon is a little bit slanted on this one, and as a photographer, I would say, oh, gee, I have to get that horizon even, and I would
Yeah.
shift it. But you kept it that way. Is that
Right.
because you wanted to show movement? Because this makes me feel like I'm in a kayak and I'm moving, and not everything
You're
is
not
always
straight.
level.
It's not all
Is that
perfect.
intentional?
Well, it wasn't initially, and then when I noticed it, I thought, I kind of like that, so I'm going to leave it there. Yeah. Good observation. Yeah. Wow. Really good. Yeah.
You ever make mistakes?
Oh. All the time. All the time. So often I just start her in the day with, I am never going to figure this out, or I'll have to redo this, or, it's just definitely make mistakes. But the beauty of oil is you can paint over them, or you can dissolve the paint if it's still wet enough. You can just dissolve it with turpentine, or, there's.
I ask because I never make mistakes.
You don't? Well, that's.
I'm curious, since this collection had a beginning and a completion, how many months do you take to create all these?
This is about, it's hard to say when I started, because I sort of decided late to start, so maybe this one was about 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Wow.
They take about 2 to 3 months each, so, so I had to paint pretty fast to get this one done. Long hours. Yeah.
You described the sort of genesis of your style with your kayaking and your observation of the water and reflections. But before that, what was what was your style or your subjects, or did you have a turning point and now this is your style? You have a very signature style, but before that, did you have sort of a reckoning? And what was your style before that, or what was your preferred subject matter?
Initially, I was into black and white photography, but then I got into painting and drawing. I'll try to make this short. I really enjoyed drawing the figure. And that's why I went to BU. I commuted to BU to study the figure in all disciplines, sculpture, drawing, painting. And I just loved it. It was the best way to learn. And I came out of BU not knowing what I wanted to do. I really didn't. And then I went to Monhegan for 6 weeks, and that's when I discovered the water. So it's been a process. I mean, I have done still lifes and portraits and other kinds of landscapes that don't involve the water. But once I found the water, I found how much I love the water and the variety that it provides for me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, it's remarkable. I've never really been startled by, it was a discovery to find your work. And I've never been one to really been pulled in by artwork. It's just been sort of two-dimensional to me, but it's just remarkable.
Oh, thank you.
You know, it's a real discovery, and it's fascinating. Every time I look at something, the depth, you know, I look closely, and then I stand back, and at some point, it becomes no longer a painting, it becomes reality.
Wow.
Right.
Wow. That's fabulous.
I prefer that direction, because when I go the other direction,
Yeah.
you know. but
That's
yeah,
great.
And sometimes you can't tell the difference between a photograph and your drawing and your work, for me.
Yeah, I think the smaller the work is for anybody's paintings, the more it looks like a photograph, because things get condensed. But my hope is that if you look at my paintings up close, they become more abstract than that. So, yeah, thank you though. Appreciate that. Any other questions? Yeah.
How are you able to stay young in life? In your work.
In my work. I love that question. I just love doing it. You know, it's hard, and I complain, and I get frustrated, but it's just what an incredible thing to spend your life doing. I'm so lucky. I guess that's it, just to remember how lucky I am. Any other questions? I appreciate your questions. They've been really good. Yeah.
Question. What do you get the most fulfillment out of? Do you get the most fulfillment out of the process, or do you get the most fulfillment out of the final product?
Process, definitely. I like that question. Yeah. I mean, the kayaking and the searching and the trying to figure it all out. Yeah. I think the final part of the painting is the least favorite part for me.
Did that come later? Because for me at the beginning as a student with a young artist, it was always like the final product had to be the end all be all. And as I got older, it was, I just want to enjoy painting.
Yeah.
The final product was just more less patient, actually. It was kind of realistic. Now it's just not.
It's interesting how that switches around. I love the first, somebody told me once, be really careful, not tight careful, but about what you put down first on the canvas. Make it count and make it, just get it, be excited right then. If nowhere else, be excited right then with that initial drawing or whatever. I thought that, I don't know who told me that, but I thought, yeah, I like that idea. Yes?
I just wanted to say that I think you're very generous and kind to share your thoughts and your ideas with us.
Oh,
Appreciate it.
well, thank you. You've been a wonderful audience. Thank you. Appreciate it. It's a lot of long, lonely months in the studio. It's nice to be with some people and hear your questions and comments. Thank you very much. Appreciate you all coming. Thanks a lot.